Today we have three really reputable speakers. All are women, without necessarily intentional to bring all women in today's webinar, but we are so grateful that these women are reputable in terms of their academic achievement, their professional performance, and also their interest in teaching English, of course. Without further ado, let me first introduce our first speakers, Dr. Nguyen Thi Thuy. I'm sorry, Dr. Lon, if I miscorrectly pronounce your name, but we are so happy to have you here. A bit of a background for our audience today. Dr. Nguyen Thi undertook her postgraduate studies in University of Canberra, Australia, and Suranari University of Technology in Thailand. Dr. Lon is now a lecturer in English department, the Faculty of Education and Educational Innovation, Kalasin University in Thailand. Before she moved to Thailand in 2011, she used to be a lecturer and a teacher for more than 10 years in Vietnam. Specialization of Dr. Lon is in teacher education, written corrective feedback, genre analysis, English written discourse, second language writing instruction and research, academic writing, ESL, ESP, and also professional writing with genre-based approach, citation and reporting verbs. Publications of Dr. Lon can be found throughout different topics. Of course, have been published in international journal, which all of you can explore through Google machines. There are more that you can explore more on internet, but I will give only short introduction for Dr. Lon, and she will deliver her materials for us today. Dr. Nguyen, your time is 40 minutes for presentations, and it will be followed by question and answer afterwards. And for the audience, please be reminded once again that you're free to write your questions in the chat box. Without further lengthy explanation, Dr. Nguyen, the time for your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Linda, for the introduction. Can you hear me, everyone? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to check. Okay, so again, thank you, Linda, so much for your introduction. And also thank you, Santri and the organizing team for including me and also making this webinar happen. So that's why I have the opportunity to meet, and maybe not meet in person, but actually to know many of you here today. That would be impossible to do it during this pandemic time. So once again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, this one. So everyone, can you see my screen now?
I hope yes, it is already on screen.
Oh, okay, yeah. So when we talk about the issue of teaching writing, so I think that as writing teachers, we own concerns about how we provide the effective feedback on our student writing, right? And that actually was also my concern. And in my session today, in 40 minutes, I would like to share with you an effective feedback approach that I found and also apply, at least successfully, effectively with my Thai student. So that's what I would love to share with you today. And this approach is, the short one asked approach. But in order for you to follow my approach, share in today's session easily, I think it's also a good idea for us. Well, what can I move it? To review. Wait a minute, I need to change the setting because I cannot see my slide. Okay. So it is so good for us to review some literatures on why we need to provide the feedback on the student writing, when, which feedback, or which error or how to provide the feedback, and who would do the feedback revision in the literatures in order for you to follow my approach easily. Okay, so now the first question we start is what is the feedback? So I think you can answer this, right? Feedback is a kind of information provided to the performances in order for them to know about how well they perform, in order for them to maybe improve their performance. But in reviewing the literature, among many definitions of feedback on writing, I like the one by Hattie and Timberlake 2007 the most. As you can see here, it's just because for them, providing the feedback on the student writing is not just about the assessment, it's been the feedback, but it also include feed up and feed forward. It means that it include us in reminding our students about the learning goals, where they are going, and also to help them, to support them in order for them to know how they can move in order to achieve their learning goals. It's mean the guidance. So that's why I like this definition the most, and also actually my approach in providing feedback is also following this definition. Okay, so now let's move on to the next one. So when we provide the feedback on the student writing, so what do we usually center our attentions on, everyone? You can send the message in the chat box. So what do you usually focus on in providing the feedback on your student writing? Oh, sorry, how can I read the message? I don't see it now, but in order to answer this question, okay, so let me move to the next slide because I cannot reach the chat box now. So we need to, in order to answer that question, we need to know what makes a piece of writing good. So I think you would agree with me that in order for a piece of writing to be good, it should include the good quality of the language use, right? The writer needs to have rubber language use in terms of vocabulary use or grammar. And also they need to have the logicals or related or relevant arguments in terms of what the question or what they would like to write in the writing. And besides that, they also need to know how to organize their idea in the conventional ways in order to meet the requirement of the writing task. So because of these three elements in making a piece of writing good, so that's why I think in providing the feedback on our student writing, we also need to focus on these three, not just on the language use. Okay. And the next question I would like you to think and also share is that, but the problem is that I don't see your answer if you put in the chat box. So I'm so sorry, I don't know how to use it. Okay, so do you think that when we correct the student writing, I mean that provide feedback on the student writing, it would help them or not? Do you think that feedback will help the student? Does it work? Let me see how I can read your answer. Chat box. Oh, chat here. Does it work? Oh, I don't see any answer here. So whether it's work or not, I think we need to review the literature on this. Wait a minute. Okay, so in the literature, actually, there are two opposing viewpoints about the effectiveness of the feedback. So for those who support the effectiveness of feedback, they say that, yeah, that's what the student expect the teacher to do. And also not only the student, but the stakeholder, the student parent also expect the teacher to do their job by providing the feedback. And with the feedback provided by the teacher, the student have the record of what they have performed, what they have done well, or what they haven't done well in order for them to improve themselves. And also, the student research also said that the student would become better writer if the teachers provide the feedback, because they learn from correcting the feedback provided by the teachers. But in the literatures, there's also a lot of arguments against the effectiveness of providing feedback on the student. And you can see here, they say that it's a waste of time because the student would ignore the teacher's feedback. It seems like true. And then they put everything away. They never look at what I commented on their writing. And it's true. Some researcher also mentions about this, and they said that it doesn't work because the student would not understand the comment or the feedback provided by the teachers. And if we revise a lot of feedback with the red marks on the student writing, the student feel like their writing works. So that's why it's demotivate the student. So among the people, the researchers, I mean the research scholar who are against the effectiveness of feedback, you can see here, dress code is the key one. Okay, and actually dress code even say that provided feedback on the student is harmful, is a waste of time. And my question is that, do you agree with him? Do you agree that we should not provide the feedback on the student because it's a waste of our time and it's harmful to the student? Okay, so in order to know what dress code actually against, we need to be clear. What dress code is again is the correction. He's not against the feedback. The correction means that he against the feedback on grammatical errors only. He's not against the feedback on content, organization, or the latitudes of the language use. So again, what dress code is again, especially in his work in 1996, is the revisions of the feedback on the grammar only. Remember that? So it means that, yes, it's a kind of task we writing teachers should do, keep doing. Okay, so now when we correct the feedback, I mean that when we need to correct the student error. So in the literature, they also say that we need to correct the student feedback in every draft. So no matter how many drafts you ask a student to write for one topic or one task, you have to provide the feedback. But actually, they divide it into two, the early drafts or the later drafts. We have different focus in providing the feedback. In the early drafts, we focus on the global errors. It means that on the content organization rather than on the local one. The local one means on the grammar. But in the later drafts, we focus more on the language use, it's been the grammar. Yeah, I think you would agree with me that there's no point for the early drafts to be the same or similar to the last draft. So that's why should we focus on fixing the student language rather than to focus on fixing the ideas, the organization in order for them to have the better draft. And with the better draft in terms of contents and organization, we can help them with the language in order to perfect their writing. Okay, so those are suggestions from the literatures. Okay, so now which error to correct? So you may also ask by yourself when you teach writing, right? So which error to correct? The literature also suggests that we should prioritize our feedback. So how should we prioritize our feedback? How should we put the priorities on the feedback we would like to revise on our student writing? So here first, they say that we should focus on the serious or the global mistake that impede the reader comprehension. We all know that when we write, we want to communicate our intended message to the audience, to the readers, right? So that's why any mistake our students make that may interrupt the reader's understanding of their intended message should be corrected first. And then the next one, the pattern of frequent errors. When we teach a group of students a lot, what errors your student, most of your student or many of your students make, those are the kind of mistakes you should focus on in providing the feedback. And also the last one is the stigmatizing error. So what is it? What are they? Stigmatizing error is a kind of errors we make maybe because of the influence of our first language. Like for my Thai student, they in their Thai language, they don't have a punctuation. They don't have capitalization in writing. So that's why when they write in English, they write non-stop, you know, they continuously writing. And also they don't use the capitalization for the words properly. So those are the kind of mistakes we need to make because our student may not be aware of those kind of conventional requirement in writing in English. Okay, so now the next question, you may ask how to correct the student errors. How to correct the student error? How many ways, which way to use to correct the student error? So here in the literature, especially from Ellis 2009, he suggested some ways. Actually, there are two pairs. Focus, unfocused, or we say a selective or comprehensive approach in providing the feedback on our student writing. So for the focus feedback strategies, we focus on one or a limited number of errors the student make. Okay, it means that we have the purpose in helping our student mastering the kind of language like article, for example. So we just focus on that kind of error only. It's a focused feedback strategy. And the second one, unfocused, this means that you correct any mistake you find in the student writing. And the second pair of feedback strategy, the teacher can use it direct or indirect, or we say explicit, implicit feedback strategy. Direct means you provide a correction on the student writing. You ask them to do or what you want them to do in order to improve their writing directly, clearly. But for indirect one, you can give the hints. You don't correct the student mistake, but you give them the hint, maybe using the code, or maybe just show them that the mistake is it by underlying the mistake the student make. Okay, so the second pair is direct, indirect feedback strategies. And the next one is meta-linguistic. It means that you can write the explanation, the rule to the student on the mistake the student make. And the last one, I think we commonly use now is the electronic one, like some kind of feedback we can use from the track changes, Grammarly, audio, or screencasting. So these are the kind of feedback strategy the teacher can use in providing on the student. But which one should we use? I think you may ask, right? Okay, so now the next, in the next slide, you can see the general recommendation for feedback strategies. You can see here, so like in the literature, they say that when we use direct feedback, when we use indirect feedback. So here you can see that they say that we use direct feedback strategies when the error the student make are untreatable. Untreatable means the error that don't have the rule in order to explain to the student, like the writing style, the word choices. So we should show the student, we should correct the student errors. And the second one, if our students are low level, we should correct their writing, their mistake. But for the indirect feedback strategy, it means that the teacher do not provide a correction. The teacher just show the student mistake or error is it. So for this one, the literature suggested that we use this strategy for the treatable error. It means the error that have the rule. The student can find and check the rule, and then they can fix the mistake. And also the errors on the language item that the student have mastered, like I just mentioned before, like you have taught the student the articles, for example. So you would like them to master using that. So you just show them mistake there. So the student have to review the rules and then they can fix. Okay, and also for your student at intermediate or advanced level, so you may not need to revise the correction on the errors. And in general, they also say that as a writing teacher, we can make the combinations of direct or indirect feedback strategy in provided feedback. So I'm sure that from reviewing the literatures, you may wonder, how can you provide the feedback on your student? How much feedback should we use or should we revise on the student? And what way should we revise in order for the student to make use of our feedback in order to improve their writing? So I think that you may be confused now, even though the literatures give us a lot of guidelines, right? So that's why in the next part, I'm going to share with you the approach, the feedback approach that I employ and I found effective in with my Thai student. Okay, so the ASK approach, the ASK is just the short course. Okay, it stands for attitudes, strategies, and knowledge. So the attitudes here, I refer to the student attitude. Because the literature said that the student do not believe that they can be beneficial, I mean that they cannot get the benefit from the feedback provided by the teachers. And they don't understand the teacher feedback. So that's why they may not take the teacher comments or feedback seriously in providing, in correcting, in fixing their writing. So that's why the student positive attitude, or at least proper attitude to the feedback activities, it means that they need to respond, they need to correct in order to improve their writing, is very important. And the second, the next two parts are about the strategy and the knowledge. The teacher needs to equip to support the student in order for the student to handle the feedback or to act upon the feedback in order to make the writing better. Okay, so how the teacher will do it? Okay, so now the first one, the attitudes. So as a writing teachers, in order for your student to make use of the feedback you provided, or maybe your student, I mean that their peers, revise on their writing, you need to make your student believe that, maybe through anyways, maybe explanation, discussion, or maybe to the actual task. for your student to understand that they are the only person who can improve their writing. So that's why after they finish the final draft of the writing, it's not on for them. They need to have the feedback from their friends or maybe their teachers, and then they need to reflect, respond in order to improve this writing. So that's attitude should be on your student in order for your feedback activity or for feedback you provide on the student works or help them in their writing. And the second part is about the strategy. What kind of strategies? Because in the literature, they say that the student do not understand the feedback provided by the teacher. So that's why they didn't do anything with the feedback. So that's why as a teachers, we need to equip our students with the strategy in order for them to unpack the feedback. What the feedback means to them, how can they respond, how can they fix in order to make their writing better. Okay, and I also need to know how to act on this. And I think you also need to train the student to provide the feedback on their peers writing. Because when they provide the feedback on their peers writing, they would be aware of the assessment criteria as well as the requirements for the writing task. So from acting as a reviewer on their friend's writing, they would know what they're expected to do in their writing. So I think that is also important part in training our students to react to the feedback. And the next thing is that by doing that, the student will be able to self-edit their own writing, because our purpose is in helping our students to be a self-editors of their own writing in the future, not just to respond to the feedback of the writing task in the class only, but we would like them to be the self-reliant, the self-editors of their own writing in the future. Okay, and that's why we also need to help them how to work with their peers in order to be able to provide the feedback on their friends' writing. Okay, so we can do this through maybe tutorials, through discussion, or maybe you can make use of the actual writing task for your student to practice, because those require the teacher training in order to help the student to know how to. Okay, so it takes teachers a lot of effort and time, I'm sure about that. And the last thing is the knowledge. Because the student may understand, yeah, that's what I'm doing wrong, but the student also need to know how I can fix it. It means that they need the knowledge in order to act upon the feedback, in order to fix. So that's why the teacher needs to provide the support. So the support the teacher provide maybe through their self to practice fear feedback. It means that provide the feedback on their friends' writing, but the student may be hesitant in doing it because they say that, how do I do it? I don't know how to do it. This and that means they have many reasons for not doing that. So that's why we need to provide them with the assessment task, like you may train them first and then you may apply rating, the feedback revision, in order for them to be serious about the task. Especially the feedback task, I mean. And also, we should have the follow-up activity. The follow-up activity can include the learning materials, because after the student, after you check the student writing, you can see that what knowledge your student is haven't learned, or what is missing, what their misconceptions are. So we can provide the learning material in order to support, in order to help them with the knowledge they're missing. And also, we can give them kind of a mini lesson on the rainbow poems, or maybe the writing style, in order for the student to know what they should do in fixing the errors. And those can also be the exercise to raise their awareness about the writing style or the convention in each writing task. Okay, so these three elements are applied in my peer teachers feedback practices. So the following section is that what I actually did with my Thai student in writing. And as you can see here, my feedback practices is the combined peer teachers feedback. The reason I will explain to you later. I don't apply just peer feedback, but the combined one, peer teacher feedback. And the feedback practices I'm going to share with you, actually I have applied many years ago, and I got all of them published, at least 4 papers in the Scope Journal. And you know what, these practices will apply not only in teaching my student how to write a paragraph, but also how to write a short composition and also the essays. Okay, so now let's get to know my student. As you know that my students are Thai. They are pre-service English teachers. They will be the English teachers. And when they did the writing with me, they were in their second and third year of study. Here, the student had to study 5 years to be the teachers. And they did the writing courses in their second and third year. And you know what? Even though they have learned English from elementary to the university, but English was taught in Thailand as a subject, not as a skill subject. It means that they generally learn grammar, vocabulary. They never learn how to write in English. Also in their task, they never do the writing task. I mean that the actual task, writing task, but the task is usually in the kind of a sentence completion, rearranging the words to make the sentence. So those are kind of writing tasks in the national test in Thailand. And besides that, the teaching methods here are kind of grammar translation, the old one. So that's why the students are not used to learn a certain kind of genre in writing like paragraph or essay. They have never learned how to do such kind of writing in English before, even though they are English major students, but they haven't learned how to write. And also my students are of low level of proficiency, and they study in the big class, 30, 40, sometimes 45, 50 students in the class. So that's why providing the feedback on my student is a kind of time consuming and require a lot of efforts and patience from the teachers. And beside that, the important things is that my students are very passive. It's because of their culture, I think. Because in Thai classroom, the students are not expected to be very active. They just sit quietly, listen to the teacher, do what the teacher asks. So they are not expected to be active in the class, to build the lesson with the teacher in the class. And also, my student, and I think maybe the same as Indonesian student, I mean student in Asia in general, they think that the teachers is the only source of knowledge that can help them to learn. So that's why they don't believe that their friend can help them to improve their writing, or they cannot learn anything from their friends. And some research actually on this topic in Thailand also say that students refuse to give the feedback or to give their writing to the student, their friends, their peers for the feedback. And I found that it was true with my student. So that's also explain why I apply the peer teacher feedback. It means that I ask my students to provide the feedback on their writing first, and then the teachers were the one who check their writing and their friends' feedback. So that's make the student believe that, yeah, I'm doing my job, I was doing my job, and their friend may do something wrong, but actually the teacher will back up. Okay, and another thing that applying the feedback strategy in Thailand is difficult is that in Thailand, I think because of the culture, face saving is very important. It means that people avoid to give the criticism on someone's performances directly. So that's why, that's also one of the reasons my student kind of needed a lot of training in order to change their mindset about providing the feedback when I apply the feedback strategy in the class. Okay, so now here's some strategy I did when I applied the ask approach in my class. I modified the ask approach in my class, or I say that I modified the peer teachers feedback strategies. And following the guidelines provided by Rollinson 2005, he said that in order for the feedback strategies to be effective in the class, the teacher needs to set up, train the student carefully before implementing it. If not, it may not work. So following his guidelines, I did set up. So what did I set up? I set up, it means that those are kind of the planning I make before I plan to apply the feedback strategy to a certain group of students. Okay, I taught them almost every year, but different group of students and different writing tasks like paragraph, essay, or composition. So different kind of writing tasks. So I set up. So set up what? So I make the decisions on how many students I would like them to work, because I would like them to work with their friend first and then me after. And then how long I would like them to interact with their friend in providing the feedback. And also how I would like my students to interact with each other in order to clarify the comment, the feedback provided by the peers. Because I know in the literature, the student may not act on the feedback just because they don't understand the comment provided on their writing. So that's why I would like them to clarify the feedback they provide on their friends' writing. Okay, and also how many drafts I would like my student to write. So how many drafts I want them to write, so depending on the practicalities. It means that availability of my time. Like if I have 40, 50 students in the class, so I also need to consider how many drafts I would like them to do, because if I ask them to do 3 drafts, this would take me a lot of time in checking each draft of the student writing. And also the feedback strategy. What feedback strategy, like we have reviewed, like direct, indirect, or focus, unfocused, right? So what kind of feedback strategy you would like the student to practice? And also I give them the checklist, the guidelines in providing feedback on different kinds of writing, like paragraph, different checklists, essay, different checklists for the student to focus in checking. And also how I will do with the feedback provided by student, because my students are kind of new to the feedback strategy, especially in providing the feedback on their friends. So that's why in order to force them, I say force them because I would like them to do it because I think it's helpful to them. So I told them that I will rate their feedback. This means that if I found that they did not provide the proper feedback on their friend because of their laziness, I will give them the minus. Or when they receive the feedback on their friends or even from me, but they did not act upon the feedback, they ignore the feedback provided by peers or teachers. So they also get the minus from me. So that's the way to ensure that my students attend to the feedback provided by peer or teachers in their revision. And also in their revision and responding to the feedback, I also ask them to write the report, okay? And I give them the guidelines. And also, I also prepare the follow-up activity for every writing for my student. When I found that they need some knowledge or they need some kind of awareness about the writing style or something, so I have to divide the follow-up activity. So this is the kind of setup I thought before I start the class. And here what I actually do. So I had the student to work in a group of 4. They have 3 drafts, and the first draft checked by their friends, the second and the third draft checked by me, the teacher, and we use the same guidelines, okay, what to check. And also I decided to employ the indirect, unfocused feedback. It means that check every mistake the student make. Indirect means just underline to show the student the mistake, don't give the correction on the student, because I would like my student to think about the mistake in order to learn and to remember. Okay, and I allow the student to use their first language in interacting with their friends. And also, as I mentioned before, right, I check the student feedback on their friends and also the student acting upon the feedback provided by teachers or students. Minus will apply if they found that they were lazy, they did not attend to the feedback. And in submitting their writing, the revised version, they also need to submit the summary of their response, their awareness, error awarenesses, and also the revised draft. So let me show you my checklist in order for you to easily follow me. So here is the paragraph checklist, as you can see here. I divide into 3 parts: format, organization, and content, and language and mechanic. And for each part, under each part, I give the question for the student in order to check, to look at their friend's writing and check yes or no. If no, why not? And they have to show their friend about the mistake. And you can see here for the language and mechanics, I put them the last because I would like my student to remember that language is not the most important thing in writing to make the writing good. Because I found that my students seem like to focus on grammar rather than on content and organization. So that's why I also reminded them. And in order to help them with checking the language, I also provide them with the correction key, as you see here. Because I use the indirect feedback, it means that I would like the student to use the symbol, the code, in providing the feedback, like underline the feedback and write the code on the top. So I explain to the student the symbol and then the meaning, and then the student apply it in providing the feedback on their friend writing in terms of the language. Okay, and when the student revise their draft, they need to write the response summary together with their revised draft. So in the response summary, there are two parts. The first one is the summary of the mistake they make in terms of format, organization, content, language mechanic. And under each part, they have to tell me how many mistakes they make, how many mistakes they decided to correct, how many mistakes they decided not to correct. Because sometimes their friend did not give them the correct feedback. It means that they got the right one, but their friends say it's wrong. So they have the right not to correct, but they have to report. I would like to make sure that my students attend to their friend feedback. And also in the second part, as you can see here, they have to report what mistake they make and what the correction. They have to report everything. So by doing that, I would like my students to focus on the feedback and how they improve, how they fix, in order to remember and to avoid the same mistake in the next writing. And beside this response summary, I also ask my student to complete this error awareness sheet. And I use for the writing, paragraph writing in 2019 term 2. And you can see here, for this one, I focus exactly on the checklist. I mean the guidelines for paragraph writing, format, organization, content, language, mechanic. And I give them here, so they have to, and you can see here, for each writing, total, they have 7 writing. For each writing, they have 3 drafts. So under each draft, they have to report how many mistakes they make with the title, how many mistakes they make with the topic sentence, the supporting sentence, how many, they have to report every mistake here, and every draft in their writing. And at the end, they can see the total of each kind of mistake in order for them to see that their weakest area. It means they know what is the most common mistake they make, what is the second common mistake they make, in order for them to know their weaknesses in order to improve their writing. Okay, and I just show you here this one is a checklist for essays. So for example, on kind of essay, and I modified it from this author. And you can see here, I also divide into part: organization, grammar, mechanic, content, and score. And under the organization, I have each part like introduction, body, conclusion, in order for my student to answer. By answering the question, it's been that they can see whether their friends have this kind of information in the writing or not. And also by doing this, as I mentioned to you before, my students remember the assessment criteria or also the requirement for each writing task. So those are the kind of document I prepare for my student before I apply the feedback strategy. So now in training the student, I explain to the student. I also make use of my student writing. Like I have 7 writing in the paragraph writing class, so I make use of 2 writing in order for the student to practice how to provide the feedback, how to respond to the feedback to their friends. And the purpose of the training is to inform the student, to tell the student the principle, the objective, as well as the rationale, the benefit of such activities, in order for the student to believe that those are the kind of activity that help them to improve their writing. And I also show them how to interact with their friends in the group, and the basic procedures or the effective comment or revision they need to follow in providing the feedback to their friend or responding to their friends or teacher feedback. Okay, so now here what I implemented, and you can see here I have 3 drafts. In the first draft, after I teach the lesson, so I give the topic to the student write home and bring 4 copies to the class. In class, they work with their friends, free of choice. They can choose their own friends. And first, they have to deliver their writing to each friend, and then decide on which friend's writing they decide to check first. So first, all of them work independently on each friend's writing to comment. And when they finish, all of them finish checking the first friend writing, they need to talk to each other in order to clarify to the writer what kind of comment, what kind of mistake the writer made. The writer also did reject their own writing, and then they discuss, and then after that they go home and revise. And when the student work in groups, as a teacher, I walk around in order to help them, if necessary, okay, and also to ensure that they are working. And in the second draft, the students submit to me in the next class. And when they submit, I already mentioned to you that they need to submit the summary of the responses, the errors, when I see it, and on the first draft. Why on the first draft? I would like to make sure that my student responded, acting upon the feedback provided by their friend. Because I asked them to do the summary of the feedback, right? So I have the evidence looking at their first draft in order to ensure that they did it properly. Okay, and also to see what witness my student have, and then I give the follow-up activity, and then the student revise the second draft at home. And on the third, sorry. Okay, on the third draft, you can see here, so they do the same, and on the third draft, their writing will be rated, and follow-up activities are given. So in general, this is the order of my class. So first, I start in the first 45 minutes, I return the student writing, ask them to read the feedback, and then to ask questions if they have, and I explain my comment to the student. If they have question I don't understand, I can summarize the commonly mistake the student make, and I can give them the kind of mini lessons or the follow-up activity in order to help them with the mistake they commonly make. And then we work on the feedback writing of the next writing. This means 1 hour for the student, for student to work in groups, right? Group of 4 for student to check on their friends writing, the next writing topic. And then the lesson of the new writing task, and to prepare for the new writing in the last 45 minutes. So the total time of my class is 50 minutes. Okay, 2 hours, 30 minutes in the class. Okay, so I know that time is coming, so I just want to wrap up quickly. So what I learned from my feedback strategies, why I found it effective. So the first lesson I learned is that the student awareness, or the student proper or positive attitude to the benefit of the feedback activity is very important. As mentioned before, right? Thai students, or maybe like many other students in Asia, they believe that teachers is the only source of knowledge they can learn from. So that's why the teacher needs to help the student to have the proper attitude to see the benefit of the feedback activity in order for them to do it, and they gain the benefit from such activity. It's very important. And the second lesson I learned is that if you would like your student to provide the feedback on their friends' writing, let them choose their friends, because I feel like how much the student benefit from the feedback given by their friends depending much on how close, how trusted they are with their friends. So that's why let the student choose their own friends. And also, if you would like your student to do the peer feedback, I think it should be done under your supervision. Like my students were trained on how to provide the feedback with the guidelines provided to them. But when they provide the feedback, you know what? They focus on the language only, the mistake with the language use only. So that's why the teacher presence in time in order to adjust the feedback behavior is very important. And also I found that my students, when they provide the feedback on the content, they usually give the confusing comments. So that's why the teacher need to be present in order to help the student with such difficulties, okay, in order to ensure that the feedback works. And also, even though my students are at low level of proficiency, but I found indirect, unfocused feedback works. I use indirect because I would like my students to center their attentions on what's wrong in order to learn from the mistake they make in order to avoid. And maybe I think the success of my feedback strategy could be because of my rating on their feedback responses, comments. So that's what I thought. Maybe not very appropriate, but I think that our purpose, or my purpose, is to help my students. So I do no harm to them. So I apply the rating to the feedback provided by my students, also their responses to the feedback provided by me or by their friends. And another lesson I think is that for low level student, written feedback is better than the oral one. If you ask them to give the feedback on their friend orally, I think it would put more pressure on them. So ask them to write down what's wrong is better. And also, I allow my students to use Thai language in interacting, in explaining to their friend what they think or what they found wrong with their friends writing. So I feel like it's helped. And I think for this one, it's in line with the theory, actually the theory provided by Vygotsky and Landorf on the mediating roles of the first language on the foreign language learning. Okay, and also I feel like the teacher returning the feedback to the student timely help the student engage in the feedback activity, because what they have written or what they have revised still fresh in their mind. So that's why it's helped them to kind of consolidate the knowledge quickly. So that's why I try my best. Actually, it took me a lot of time and efforts and patience in providing my returning my student writing every week, especially when I taught big classes here. And also, I think that for any changes, it would not happen at the individual level. It's required the support from, I think, the open-minded boss or the school leaders in order for the teachers to make it happen. Like for me, even though the curriculum require me to teach every lesson a week, in the book, every lesson in the book a week. But my boss, I mean the chairs of my department allow me to modify it. Like first, I taught the student how to write a paragraph, for example, maybe 4 or 5 weeks. And after that, I come teach them each lesson by applying the theory on how to write a paragraph in writing on the topic in the book. So that's helped me. I mean that support helped me a lot in making this happen. Okay, so here's are the 4 papers I published on what I just shared with you in the short time. Four papers, actually 3 on the journal Scott Index journal and 1 in the book chapters, but it's also indexed in the Web of Science. Okay, if you want to read more, you can. And here I share with you a lot. I know time is over. So now, what I would like you to remember from my session here is that feedback is the conversation between maybe peers when you ask a student to do the feedback on their friend's writing, or maybe between the teacher with the student when the teacher provides the feedback on the student. And in this conversation, this is not just about the teachers or the friend diagnosing the feedback, the mistake, the error made by the student. It means not just about the assessment by marking or showing them what's wrong, but it involves many cycles of response and follow-up by the teacher and the student. And these cycles are about reminding the student of their learning goals, what they need to achieve, what assessment criteria are, and with the guidance to the follow-up from the teachers in order to help the student. These cycles actually take time and differentiated depending on our student, and also can be done orally or written mode, and also can the kind of homework like I ask my student to do, to revise, to do the writing and to revise at home. And this cycle for me about the feed up and the feed forward, I think you still remember the definition I mentioned from the beginning, are the prime time for the student in order to progress in that writing. And these frameworks is showing how we provide the feedback from the low impact marking and feedback to effective and formative feedback approach. Okay, so here's some papers I read in presenting today, and just a reference. Okay, so no. Okay, so that's all for my presentation. I hope that's not too late, right? Okay, so now I'm happy with the questions you have for me.
Yes, Dr. Lon, thank you very much. It's really inspiring, because writing sometimes for us is so intimidating and so difficult for us to start. There are already some questions written on the chat box. 3 of the audiences asking about in relation to the type of students, the 5 types of student or category of students with problematic issues that you mentioned in one of your slides. The question they ask is which one is the most complicated to deal with, and what would be the best solution to deal with those problems? If you can start with that question first.
Sorry, I may miss it because I was busy browsing around how I read the comment. So can you read the question again, please?
Sure. There are several participants asking the same questions, which deals with the five type of students that you mentioned in one of your slides. So the question they ask is which one of those five types that are the toughest or to struggle or to deal with, and what are the best strategies to deal with those five type of problems or
You mean the feedback strategy?
problematic students?
You mean the feedback strategy, right? Five times.
No, the type of students. Yes, yes. You mentioned in one of your slides the types of students who are passive learning styles, who have all teaching pedagogy, all those type of students.
So you mean that the characteristic of my student? Is it
Yes,
what,
yes,
is it
yes,
what you
yes,
want to ask, right? So
yes,
the question is that which one is the most difficult for me to handle?
yes. And what are the best strategy? Because I think this is a reflection that teachers often found in their classrooms, similar to your experiences.
Yeah, actually, the student low level of proficiency is actually difficult for us to apply the feedback strategies because they feel like they don't know how to provide the feedback. How do they are not confident actually about how they are able to provide the feedback on their friends. So that's actually difficult. And that's why I say that we need to change their mindset. It's meant to change the attitude about that. They can, even though the good student can provide the student a good feedback they can learn from, but even though the friend, I mean that the weak one, they can also help them in learning. That's what I make my student believe. How can like if your friend, the weaker one, give the feedback on your writing, that's what I explain to my student, and their feedback is wrong, that's the chance for you to verify, to check whether you are wrong or your friend, that friend is wrong. When you are verifying, it means you know you are wrong or your friend is wrong, not you. It means that you confirm the knowledge you have, like your friend's wrong, not you. So even though the good friend give you the correct feedback or the weaker friend give you the wrong feedback, both are good. Good, you can learn from the good friend. You can also consolidate, confirm the knowledge you have from the weak friend. Actually, that's the difficult part. I have to change the student mindset. Actually, I spend time for them to work on it, and I try to show them, yes, you see, your friend can help. Even though she's weaker than you, she can help. This is very difficult. And also, the another difficult part for me with my student is the cultural part. Why? Because they kind of polite to their friends. Because kind of face saving is a kind of the part of the culture. They don't want to openly criticize their friend to the face. So that's why they try to say, okay, good, 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 good. I say, no, comment to your friend what you think is not good. Because if you just say good, 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 what they learn from your feedback. Here, we don't want to intimidate our friend. We are helping them by telling them what's wrong. We are not intimidating them or making them feel ashamed. We are helping each other. So that those are the kind of things I have to change my student. That's why I say that the attitude, the student attitude is very important. The teacher need to make them believe that. And in order to make them believe that, I use tool writing. Tool writing, for each writing, I have 3 drafts. It means that 6 drafts in order for students to practice and then believe in what they practice. Yes, my friend can help. Yes, my friend show me. My friend don't make me feel ashamed. That's the point, you know. So we don't mind the students are weak, but the thing is that they are willing to do what we ask, and also they overcome the barrier, the cultural barriers, in order to join the activity we think that's benefit to them. And that's also require the teachers a lot of effort and strategies in order to adjust their thinking. And yeah, I think that I hope that I can answer your many of you question, right? You said many friends asked, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But I'm happy to explain more if you want to ask me more about this.
Can we follow up with some other questions if you not mind? There are questions about problems or mistakes that made by students. For instance, you mentioned about punctuation and the use of capital letters, which commonly seen in your students' work. Aside of those problems, what are the other mistakes that you also see in writing, students' writings?
So for my Thai student, beside the punctuation and capitalization, because their language doesn't have it, so that's the kind of, they are influenced by their first language, in writing in English. And the other thing that I found my student, the common mistake my student make is Google translation. They didn't think about writing in English, thinking in English, in writing. They first thought in Thai, and then they use Google to translate and then to pass. They did not, I feel like they were not aware of the differences in the writing style, the structure, the two languages have. So that's also the part of the writing. And for me, I'm kind of strict. Actually, I am known as a strict teachers here because I usually apply the punishment to the student. If I found that you use the Google Translate to do the writing, I will give you 0 for the task. So I make the kind of rules for my students. I just want to prevent them from doing that. I want them to write by themselves. Write by yourself. No matter what your friend will help, I will help you 3 times. So don't worry. So those are the kind of thing I found that my students had. And also they share with me in kind of personal communication. They say that actually they found it's hard to organize the ideas, like in English, when we write the paragraph, we have only one topic for topic sentence, one topic for one sentence for concluding sentence. But in Thai language, the more sentences in the conclusion, the better, the more beautiful the writing will be. So that's why my students have 2, 3, 4 sentences at the conclusion. Those are the kind of thing I have to tell them many times, no, please, one sentence is enough. But they say, I feel like it's not beautiful because in my language, it should be like this, it should be like that. So those are the kind of thing. Actually, I'm not Thai, I'm Vietnamese, right? I'm working in the culture, but actually I know the culture. So that's why, because I've been here for 10 years, so that's why I'm kind of adapting. And I know my students witness this, so that's why I prevent them from beginning by setting the rule. Okay, should not do that, should not do this. So I'm kind of setting the rule from the beginning. So that's why my students know and adjust themselves to the rule, and they become aware of the expected requirement in writing in English.
Thank you. That's really a good mind opening for us to know that writing problems can be solved. But there is a question from a student's perspective. According to him, why most academic writing is so complicated? Why can't academics write something clearly and concisely? They tend to make things so difficult for the readers. Do you share this opinion? How do you see this?
So the students think that why academic writing is so difficult? Is it what they say, right?
Yes,
okay.
It is.
Yeah. So whenever we do anything, we need to follow the rules, the requirements, right? Like when you are the student at the university, you also need to follow the rule for the student. So the same apply in all kinds of fields or areas, especially in the academic field. So when we write academically, it means that they have the convention. They have a convention for us to follow. If we don't follow such convention, people may not understand us. So let me share with you a very simple example. Like you are writing an email to the company to complain about the product you just bought. But the language you use and you don't follow the rule, like, okay, you first need to read them. Okay, dear sir, madam, and then your body, the message is to complain. And then you have to close, like, okay, thank you, look forward to your reply, for example. And then you sign off. We have the structure in writing an email, so we have to follow. If you don't follow that, they don't think that that's the email you want to communicate to them. And even in the body, you want to complain. But the language you use, you don't follow the language, the structures in expressing the complaint. The reader, the company may think that you are giving the compliment on their product. They don't think that you expect them to solve the problem you are complaining, you are raising. So you see, If you don't follow the requirements, the format of the certain kinds of writing, the reader will not perceive, will not believe, or will not think that is the kind of writing with the message, the intended message you want to communicate. So that's why it's hard. Like when you write the research article, you also need to follow the requirement of the research article. When you write an essay, you also need to follow the requirement of the essay, or a paragraph, you have to follow the required. That assessment or the criteria for each kind of writing in writing, in order to make people recognize your text and with the intended purpose. If not, people will not recognize that's the kind of text you would like, or the kind of message you would like to communicate to them. They misunderstand your information or the intended message in writing. So I hope that I can answer your question. Yes, it's difficult because it's not your language. If it's not easy, you don't need to study, I think. But believe me, when you know the rules and apply the rule in writing, you will feel that, yes, it's just a piece of cake. Trust me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lon. It's really inspiring. Learning and doing things are easy if we do things by day. There are few other questions, but I will keep them in the later closing speech of yours. Then I will highlight those issues as well. So thank you very much for your presentations. It's good to have you here. Once again, we are so grateful to have you here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.